one of the benefits is the percentage cost for some of these tools is much lower. So you can go spend something up. If it doesn't work, if it's not giving you the results you want, or it's too cumbersome for the team to support, pivot, stop using that tool and move to something else.
Listen, it's the small and simple things that make the biggest difference.
Absolutely. Make a massive difference.
Welcome to FinOps in Action. I'm your host, Alon Arvatz. Each week, I'll sit down with FinOps experts to explore the toughest challenges between FinOps and engineering. This show is brought to you by Point 5, empowering teams to optimize cloud costs with deep detection and remediation tools that drive action. Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of FinOps in Action. Today, I'm actually very excited to have a special guest. The guest today has over 20 years of experience in IT. He led global teams in implementation of new technologies and supporting data centers. At UKG, he oversaw all aspects of cloud infrastructure and built a new cloud governance organization. Today is FinOps and M&A. We should talk about that as well at IEM. I'm happy to welcome Peter Crenshaw. Peter, how are you today?
I'm good, Alon. How are you?
Now that I see you, I'm doing great. Peter, please share with us, what is the one thing that you got wrong when you started your FinOps career?
Sure. So my FinOps career started back in the 2019 timeframe. And I think one of the things I got wrong when we first started out was sticking to our first decision. So it was a large SaaS company, large spend. At the time, there weren't a lot of tools on the market as there is today. And so we decided to go our own way and build our own base tool to show us our costs. And as soon as we started working through that and building through it, we found all the nuances and the challenges of that, but we kind of kept our straight direction and continued to build that out, running into all the fun issues that all the providers run into today with the large data sets. And I think if we had taken a step back, reevaluated, and decided to find a product to handle the basics, the basic reporting, the basic allocations, things like that, we would have been able to focus on the bigger impact items than spinning our wheels with an engineering team that was just trying to keep our heads above water and get accurate data. So I think that'd be my one thing that I wish I could have redone back in the beginning of my FinOps career. And
it's actually very fascinating to hear you say that, because I always feel like the people that build their own tools are very vocal about.
They are. I even did a FinOps presentation on it at the very beginning. Like, we were very excited. We wanted to show off what we were doing. But then the day-to-day and the constant provider changes, and every little line of code change that somebody makes has massive impact on how things are reported and grouped together. And we spent more time verifying our numbers than we did actually using them and sharing them and things like that. So when I left UKG in January, they were still using that platform. And at scale, it is very hard to replace a platform. It's one of those, you have investment, you've made a decision, you stick to it, but sometimes you have to change course. And I think that is the course I missed.
Okay. And would you say that it actually took time of actually doing FinOps because you had to build the underlying platform?
Absolutely. It took, an entire SRE team as well as my FinOps team to actually figure out how to build it. And we did partner with somebody to build the base, but then we took it over after the base was built. And of course, as soon as it becomes yours and you're the one owning the code, there's things you want to change, things you want to tweak, and then things break, and then providers change SKUs and they change groupings and they change, how they report things. And it's a constant battle, as all the providers know today. So we did what we could do at the time. We were very excited about it. We went down that path, and there could have been a better way.
Interesting. And is there a specific use case or maybe certain profile of organization where you will say, yes, for this use case or for this type of organization, you should definitely build your own?
I'd say if you're a tech forward company, you have the expertise on the data and coding side, I think you could build your own for unique cases that aren't standard. Maybe you're multi-cloud and you have some very specific data routes that you're trying to track that you can't do through native tooling. I think there's more specific use cases than general, like company-based decisions that would make that determination today.
And I also think when you're taking the route of building your own, you also need to understand what are the resources that will be needed not only to build it, but also to maintain it in the long run.
But to run it, yeah, I mean, our BigQuery tables were massive. Our storage cost, our data costs were massive because now you're exporting out all your billing data into your own platform to then store. It's growing hourly, if not daily, depending on your data pool. And it gets really big, really fast. And each iteration you do, every query you run to try to go through that data is another charge. So you have to take all that into account. Sometimes our cost would have been more than a percentage of our spend with a third party just to get the basics. That's nothing special. That is just what is my costs in these specific groupings of compute, network, et cetera, by some pre-allocated tags. That was it. That's all we were trying to do, and we spent most of our time trying to make sure that worked versus the other things that we could have done to benefit the company more.
Yeah, and I actually think what you're describing is the right approach for 98% of the companies, and actually 98% of the companies do purchase external tools. But for the sake of the 2% of the people that are listening to us and considering to build, do you have some advice how to assess how much resources you will need, or it's really ad hoc per organization?
It's very ad hoc. It's all based on where you decide to put the data, how you're going to get it there, and then what tools you're going to use to scrape that data or manipulate that data. We were using a Looker front end from Google, and every time that runs, it queries the data with its BigQuery, and it costs cycles, right? So I'd say evaluate how you're going to store your data. Can you pull it someplace where you're not paying per iteration? Can you pull it even on-prem or into a location where you can actually access it without a per access cost? Would help dramatically. And then ensuring your queries are restricted to only what you need. You don't need to query your entire data set for every question. If you can minimize the data it looks at, you can minimize the cost, but you have to be that aware on every single query you create, every single dynamic query that's created, to ensure you keep your costs down. If not, you can watch them explode very quickly, regardless of where you put the data.
Nice. These are some very, very nice and good practical advice. I'm sure the 2% of our listeners are really thankful right now. And I assume that today at IEM, you implement the approach you just described. Is that correct?
We're working on implementing Vantage for our cost solution in order to, again, do the basics, get us some basic reporting. We are on a very early stage of migrating to the cloud, where we've only migrated a couple of internal applications. We don't have any customer applications. They're all internal IT. So it's very early on, and our teams are learning. They're learning how to use public cloud. And then as we go, we're trying to instill the FinOps mentality, install the frugal architecture type mentality in our architecture team, and really kind of start the right way, start with the basics and build our way up. So kind of coming into it very beginning versus midstream in the cloud journey is allowing me to get some of these tools deployed, show the value of them. That way, as we grow and as the costs do rise, we already know that the tools are a benefit of a value, and we can continue using them going forward.
That's awesome. And I will even say pretty progressive to building foundations for FinOps from the early beginning of your cloud journey, because then you have strong foundations for the long run. And I wonder, when you build FinOps in that perspective of now it's small, it's going to be very big in the future, what are like the foundations you need to put in place to make sure things will scale as you grow?
So it's instilling the thought of only spending up what you need. So if you have an engineering team that is playing or testing in public cloud, do they need to leave that up on the holiday weekend when they go out, when they're all logged off and it's not mission critical? Can we turn that off when we're not using it? Can we use a smaller size machine in dev and watch our performance in prod as we, a lot of these are lift and shifts as well. So we're not building cloud native. We're just lifting out of our current data centers into Azure, and we're trying to figure out, what works, which machine type works, let it run there for a little bit. Let's see how it performs. Can we dial that back to a lower model to save cost? We're also thinking about how do we balance the need for DR with the need to watch our egress costs? So do we want to put our database and our applications in two different regions to ensure that we have some sort of DR strategy, but then we're paying for every data bit that goes across the wire between the regions. So how can we build this that is supported by the product, because some of these products are more on-prem products, and get to a point where it's cost effective and it works for our users in a way that they're happy with.
Very interesting. I can tell you that many FinOps teams out there, the way they justify the ROI of the team is based on cost savings. I wonder if in the beginning of your cloud journey, you were able to show like positive ROI for your practice, or it's more like a long-term investment. Let's build out the foundation, the culture, we'll see the benefits in the long run.
Yeah, so I'm a team of one currently, so I'm doing both the analysis and the presentation. And from it is a long-term strategy. So you're not going to equate the cost of your FinOps team, even if it's just one person, to your initial savings out of the gate, because your spend is just too small. Well, what you want to highlight is those things that you do find, those small wins that may go under the radar at a larger organization. They may not even be a tip of the iceberg. But if I have, let's just say, $10,000 spend in a subscription, and I find $4,000 or $5,000 in unattached disks, just cleaning those up, which is a basic maintenance process that maybe we weren't doing before, we go do that. That's 40 to 50% savings in one shot. Now, still, it doesn't cover the cost of the team, but it shows the value of FinOps, and it shows at scale, it will work, and it's something that is needed. So before, those $4,000 or $5,000 were just being spent every month with nobody the wiser. Now there's visibility to it, there's awareness to it, and then there's other functions outside of direct FinOps that I'm trying to assist with from a finance and IT perspective, to build those relationships between IT and finance, now that they'll need to talk more, and forecasting and all of those things combined. So it is a longer term, building the base, building the framework, putting in those key elements, and then kind of watching it mature and adjusting as needed.
Cool. And how do you communicate these efforts and savings?
Right now, it's just emails. It's congratulatory emails saying, "Hey, look at this. Everybody loves a graph. So here's a graph that shows our spend and a dip, and this is what it was." I don't have all this built. I don't have everything into a tool yet, so I'm just kind of piecing it together until all of that is there. But right now, it's just emails and pats on the back, and showing giving everybody kudos for what they're doing, what they're learning. Some of these teams, again, are learning Azure as well. So how to balance that is you encourage and celebrate, and that way people want to look for things that they can do, or come and ask questions and then execute. And as they do that, they have a stronger foundation, and the company overall benefits because we're able to find those savings.
Listen, it's the small and simple things that make the biggest difference.
Absolutely. Make a massive difference. And it's all a team effort. I'm a one-person team. Some of the other teams are very small too. So, we get together, we talk through it. And hey, what about this? Oh, that is sized that way because we're moving this application there, and it requires that. Okay, cool. I'm going to mark that off my list and move on to the next thing. So smaller teams can work very, very closely together. They get a lot of work done. They can learn together. It's not just learning public cloud. It's learning how your apps work in public cloud, and then how that relates back to cost. So it's learning the apps all the way to the migration, and then back to cost, and then refining it, optimizing it from there.
Yes, and I assume that at UKG you manage a team of FinOps practitioners.
Correct. I did have a team at UKG.
Okay, and how is it going back to doing the FinOps work hands-on?
It's a lot more work from a data perspective, right? So ingesting raw data, doing all the analysis. It has been a transition because I was in a leadership role for quite a long time with the team. So not that I didn't get my hands dirty and work right alongside the team, but actually being the sole person to have to grab the data, translate the data, visualize the data, and then report on the data is a little bit, a few extra steps. But it's good to go back and understand the basics, and kind of back to the 2019, 2020 era where Excel was our FinOps tool, and kind of build from there. So I'm reteaching myself a lot of those skills, and trying to benefit the company that way.
Yeah. Let me tell you that Excel is still the FinOps tool of choice of many companies out there.
It is until you hit 1 million rows, and then you're stuck.
Exactly.
So, which you can hit very quickly, but as we all know.
And I'm actually really fascinated by your career path. Generally, FinOps career path is something that I find very, very interesting. Yeah, I recently published a post about it in LinkedIn, basically saying that FinOps career path is not only starting as practitioners, moving to manager and director, etc. You can also, move right to work for a service provider or a vendor or a startup. And basically you say you can also like go back to do the FinOps work
Yep.
hands-on. That's also a valid path.
Absolutely. Yeah. And actually I did read that post. It was great. But yes, absolutely. Lateral moves or even going to a individual contributor or even a manager doing the individual contributor role, which is my case. It it's all progression. So it's all building skill sets. It's all, you know, previously I was not using Azure. So now I'm learning Azure FinOps compared to other providers FinOps, and the differences there. There's nuances between each provider. So finding those opportunities, finding those areas to learn is a benefit, regardless of what your title is. It really doesn't matter what your title is.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Although there is a one small twist in your current role because you're not only doing FinOps,
Correct.
you also have M&A in your title.
That is correct.
So how did it happen and what does it mean?
Yeah. So I've been involved in M&A transactions now for 10, 15 years. Back at UKG, I led the cloud technical diligence as well as integrations to a point of understanding business, coming up with what the plan would be for putting the companies together, how would the teams work, all of that stuff, and then handing that off to the functional teams to then go execute following close of the transaction. In my current role at IEM, there was a need for some help with M&A on the technical side. So previously the CIO was kind of doing that lift himself. So they asked me to also do that while I'm here. So continuing to do diligence from a technical perspective, a little bit of a different lens. Before it was customer facing cloud diligence, and there was a separate team that did internal IT. Now I'm doing the internal IT diligence, which is very similar. Understanding how those other businesses operate for potential M&A, what that would look like, incorporating them with our corporate IT team, and then also on top of that, adding the FinOps lens to it. Where are those optimization opportunities? Are they using the same platforms we are to potentially combine, under license agreements? What are they using for their data analytics, for their, expensing, for all of that kind of stuff, so that our functional teams can then review that and say, this is what we want to do post-close. This is how we want to integrate. And then also looking at their team. Do they have a full support staff for all this stuff that we're going to add to our team? Do we need more people? Or are there optimization opportunities there? So it kind of blends the two together in two functions that I was previously doing. So it worked out really well. Those were the two areas that they needed help with.
Nice. So if you're talking about career path, that's also an option. So the skills that you're getting are also relevant maybe to other areas, not only to FinOps. So open your eyes.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yep. Yeah. I think the Cloud Plus direction of the FinOps Foundation is key, because Cloud Plus has always been there in the IT realm. We've always, IT teams have always supported SaaS products, not just public cloud, and it's been there and it's never talked about. I think the FinOps Foundation is doing a good job of bringing light to that, and kind of highlighting that, hey, now you can start with, reporting on costs, which is the core of FinOps, right? But having those skills, understanding the way of looking at the contract for that application, comparing it to a contract of the same application for somebody else, seeing where the synergies are and the savings opportunities is huge for companies that do M&A, investment banks, things like that, that want to not only acquire to grow, but also optimize their costs out of the gate.
And I totally agree with you that the foundation is doing a very, very important work from that perspective. I want to share that I found it very interesting. I heard JR talk about the process of Cloud Plus. I was back then in the governing board of the foundation, so I was part of the discussions. And he basically said that he feels like the work of the foundation is more to reflect what's already happening in the community, what people are already doing, rather than tell them, hey, this is where you should go. And Cloud Plus is exactly that. It's giving a name and giving a framework to a trend or something that's already happening.
Absolutely. I completely agree.
That was really, really nice to hear. And Peter, if I take you back, to the move from UKG to your current role, so moving from large scale FinOps operations to a smaller scale, is there a difference in your focus in UKG versus what you're doing now?
Yeah, actually, I think I have a little bit less focus because I'm doing multiple things and trying to get multiple programs and things off the ground because there are less people. There's no team, right? It's a team of one. Whereas at UKG, from a FinOps lens, I was focused on FinOps, diving into the spend, focused on the providers only, looking at that, dealing with issues with reporting or invoicing or something, but it was very specific to those providers, and it was kind of in a bubble there. Whereas here, because I'm trying to build from the ground up, it's a lot more of the education pieces. It's more of the teaching what FinOps means, talking with the accounting team, who's a manufacturing accounting team. They're used to metal showing up on a truck and us paying an invoice for metal on a truck, not a variable rate spend for cloud. So educating the accounting teams on what cloud is and why it's different and why the bills are going to fluctuate. But then also, again, like I mentioned, helping out with other things from an invoicing perspective, cost perspective, M&A perspective. So my focus is kind of all over the place now, but in a good way and in a way that definitely benefits the company in multiple ways.
And sounds like you're dealing less with technical issues and more with FinOps fundamentals.
Exactly. Yes. I am deploying, Vantage, as I mentioned before. But once that's done, I can just use it. I can configure the reporting. I can do what I need to do. I'm not dealing with fires. I'm not dealing with issues. I'm not trying to validate numbers back and forth and figure out, with the SRE team, what line of code is screwing it up and what it's going to take to rebuild it. I can focus on simply providing that data, massaging that data in a way that the teams want to understand it and see it, and then continuing from there. So it is helping me tremendously getting a tool in place to do that. There's no way I could do it all soup to nuts like I was doing before by myself, even with a smaller spend. There's no way.
Yes. Maybe you can start build your own tool and then you have.
No, I am nowhere close to a software engineer. So I would struggle with that tremendously, but there's plenty of tools on the market now. And just finding the right one, the right fit for the scenario that you're in, depending on what you want to do and what you have. That's really, it kind of takes the guesswork out of it after that.
For sure. And basically, you gave us the advice of buying a tool versus building, which is probably the right path for most companies out there. You mentioned that you just chose a tool. I'm curious if you have some tips for our listeners on how to choose a tool.
Yeah, so make sure you evaluate what that tool provides out of the box. So a lot of tools have been trying to address niche cost areas that may or may not apply, but because they've added that to their basic bundle, they've had to, they've increased their costs in some cases, or the tool may cost more, or you may have to deploy things that you're not set up to deploy. So one example is Kubernetes. If you're not using Kubernetes in your environment and there's no plans to, you don't need a tool that reports on Kubernetes costs. So if there's if the main focus is Kubernetes cost, you can look at some other tool that doesn't do Kubernetes out of the box, or it's an add-on that you can then deploy without needing to do that. The other big one for me is agents. So smaller organizations don't have the capability to deploy a lot of agents on all of their systems. They don't have the infrastructure. They don't have the manpower to maintain it. It's not something that they can support. So if there's a tool that can provide the data you need without deploying an agent to every endpoint, every device you have in the public cloud, that takes the burden of supporting it off of the sometimes one or two engineers that they have working on deploying this stuff, and makes it a lot more effective. Whereas if I had to wait for something to get deployed across our infrastructure, which is not very big, it may take a while because those teams are very busy. So look at how it pulls in data. Can it do it just out of the box with a connection, or does it need to have something deployed? If it needs something deployed, do you have the manpower? Do you have the infrastructure to support that? Not only just the initial deployment, but sometimes there's updates needed. Granted, you can skip updates a lot of times, but you may need to update it. Can you update that every, so often with the infrastructure and the resources that you have? You don't want to overburden your teams with this kind of stuff if you can take it off their plate. So in my case, I didn't have that infrastructure. I didn't have those teams to support agents. I don't have Kubernetes. I don't have a lot of native tools. It's a lot of lift and shift at the moment. So we went with a tool that offers basic reporting. All I needed was the API connection to be set up, and then I can handle it from there. And those teams are now then done and moved on to their next project, and I can start building my reporting and showing them the benefit of it without nagging them every day about, hey, do you have this installed or do you have this configured? It helps out tremendously. So evaluate, in my mind, it's evaluation of what you're looking to report on, what you need. Cut out all the stuff you don't need. Don't look for tools that have every bell and whistle. A lot of them are starting to deploy DevOps and AI capabilities for deployments and auto management. Do you need that? Is that something that is necessary within your org? If so, great. If not, are there other tools out there that may be more cost effective, that don't have that functionality, which is okay, that you can deploy and get out of the gate, and then pivot. When you're small, one of the benefits is the percentage cost for some of these tools is much lower. So you can go spend something up. If it doesn't work, if it's not giving you the results you want, or it's too cumbersome for the team to support, pivot, stop using that tool and move to something else. When the costs are low, it's much easier to do it than when you get into the upper nine figures cost of deploying a tool. You're kind of set in stone once you make that decision. Now you have bigger teams and other things to support it, but if it's not working for you, pivot and find something that does.
Nice. And sounds like the main advice is focus on what you need.
What you need. Yep. Don't worry about getting every bell and whistle and new term and new function that's out there. Focus on what your organization is using. Focus on what you need and what you think is the benefit to the company, and go down that road. Not only are you going to start getting data, you're only going to focus on what you need, and then you're going to build that repertoire with the organization. And then if the time comes to add something or go to another tool, you can say, I can do the same thing, but I can also do all this new stuff with this other tool, because we've now gone into that realm. We've gone into Kubernetes. We've gone into cloud native. I have a lot more functionality if we pivot now that we're more mature from a technology perspective. And that, as long as your story matches what you're trying to do, a lot of times, that approval comes through.
Nice. And Peter, coming to think about it, you're saying, hey, when you choose a FinOps tool, focus on what you need. You actually implemented FinOps principles to choose a FinOps tool.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Don't have waste when you choose a tool.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Don't overspend, and don't buy, the Rolls Royce when you just need a Toyota Corolla or something like it. You don't need all the bells and whistles to get the data you need out for your organization, depending on what your use cases are. But are there going to be some that use every new feature? They're very technology forward. They want to know where they're spending. Of course, there's going to be those out there that you need to buy every package to show what you're using across the board. That's the nature of business, right? Some are very technical, some are not. But what I think is great in the market right now is there's a whole realm of FinOps tools, from very basic to very advanced. And there's a mix of what each one supports. Find the one that fits the right, deploy it. If you grow out of it and you grow more technical than the tool is, pivot and deploy something else.
Great. I actually think this is a great opportunity after we heard this great advice to learn more about you personally, Peter.
Oh boy. Okay.
The best part of the podcast. And today you live at Winter Park, Florida.
I do.
Where is it in Florida, by the way?
Winter Park is just northeast of Orlando. So I'm on the exact opposite side of Disney. Disney is still an hour away from me, even though I live in the Orlando area. But zip code wise, if I walk down the street a little ways, I'm in Orlando technically. So I'm just northeast of the Orlando proper area.
Nice. Personal recommendations. If you're around Peter's home, go swim with the manatees. Amazing experience. Amazing experience. And how did you get there?
I moved to Central Florida back when I was 18, right out of high school, to attend a technical school. So I grew up in Northern Arizona, wanted a change of pace, wanted a change of scenery. So I said, well, I have some extended family out in Florida. Let me go visit them for, a little bit and go to school. So I went to what is now defunct ITT Technical Institute. But I attended their Maitland and Lake Mary campuses. And throughout that process, I got a job and got into the industry and met my wife. And here we are 22, 23 years later.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And Peter, what do you like to do for fun?
I do live in Florida, so I love to fish. I grew up fishing, even though Arizona doesn't have as many bodies of water. But so whenever I can, I try to do some either freshwater, or intercoastal, or deep sea fishing. Pretty much anywhere I can throw a line and not get eaten by an alligator. So I like to do that, and then also coach my. I have a 7-year-old son, so I've been coaching his t-ball and baseball teams for the last 3 or 4 years. So that's kept me plenty busy.
Very good, and a good opportunity for me to admit that I haven't fished since I was 12, maybe. So definitely need to refresh my fishing skills.
So do I. I don't go as often as I'd like to, but there's always something else going on.
Cool. Peter, this has been fantastic. I'm sure a lot of people would like to reach out, ask questions. What is the best way to do that?
Absolutely. Yeah. My LinkedIn is the best way to reach me. It's Peter Crenshaw. Feel free to search, reach out, make a connection, send a message, try to respond and accept everything that comes across.
Yeah, I can testify that Peter is a very accessible person. Feel free to go ahead and ask questions. Peter, thank you so much for joining us. I really enjoyed your practical approach to everything. Got your feet on the ground, which is really, really refreshing and great to hear. Typically, people that does like crazy stuff, they like to go on stages, but at the end of the day, it's the small and simple things that make the difference. So thank you for joining us and sharing all of this experience and advice.
Thank you for the opportunity. Had a great time.
That's great. And I would also like to thank our audience for joining us once again. I'm sure you had a great time. I enjoyed it tremendously. So if you heard something nice, you had a laugh, you enjoyed it, please tell a friend about the podcast and ask them to subscribe to our newsletter. Peter, thank you again. This has been another exciting, fascinating episode of FinOps in Action. See you next time. That wraps up another episode of FinOps in Action. Thank you for joining. For show notes and more, please visit finopsinaction.com. This show is brought to you by Point5, empowering teams to optimize cloud costs with deep detection and remediation tools that drive action.